For the time being, he's just lay there on a carpet, and no one who knew the condition he was in would seriously have expected him to let the chief clerk in. It was only a matter of discurrency, and the suitable excuses could easily be found in it later on. It was not something for which Gregor could be smack on the spot, and it seemed to Gregor much more sensible to leave him now in peace instead of disturbing him with talking in him and crying. But the others didn't know what is happening. They were worried. That would excuse their behavior. The chief clerk now raised his voice. Mr. Samsa, what is wrong? You barricade yourself in your room and give us no more than a yes or no for an answer. Are you causing serious and uneasy concerns to your parents and you fail? Did I mention this just by the way? You failed to carry out your business duties in the way that is quite unheard of. I'm speaking here on behalf of your parents and of your employee and really must request a clear and immediate explanation. I'm astonished, quite astonished. I thought I knew you as a clean and a sensible person, and now you suddenly seem to be showing off with a particular whims. This morning, your employer did suggest a possible reason of your failure to appear. It's true. It had to do with the money that was recently entrusted to you. Or, I came near to giving him my word to honor that could not be a right explanation, but now that I see your incomprehensible stubbornness, I no longer feel any wish whatsoever to intercede on your behalf and know your position at all secured. I had originally intended to say that all this to you in private, but since you caused me to waste my time here for no good reason, I don't see why your parents should not also learn of it. Your turnover has been very unsatisfactory of late. I grant you that it's not the time to year to do explanation good business, we recognize that. But there is simply no time of a year to do no business at all. Mr. Samsa, we cannot allow there to be. But sir, called Gregor, besides himself, but forgetting all else in the excitement, I opened up immediately. Just a moment. I'm slightly unwell. An attack of dizziness. I haven't been able to get up. I'm still in bed now. I'm quite fresh again now, though I'm just getting out of bed. Just a moment. Be patient. It's not quite as easy as I thought. I'm quite all right now, though it's shocking. What can suddenly happen to be a person? It was quite all right last night. My parents knew about it, perhaps better than me. I had small symptoms of a lasted night already. You must have noticed it. I don't know why I didn't let you know at work. But you always think you can get over an illness without staying at home. Please, don't make my parents suffer. There's no business for any of our accusations you're making. Nobody's ever said a word to me about any of these things. Maybe you haven't read a latest contact I sent in. I'll set off with the 8 o'clock train. As well, these few hours of rest have given me strength. You don't need to wait, sir. I'll be in the office soon after you. And please be so good as to tell that to the boss to recommend me to him. And while Gregor rushed out of these words, hardly knowing what he was saying, he made his way over to the chest of drawers. This was all easily done, probably because of the practice he had been already had in bed. where he now tried to get himself upright. He then went to open the door, really did went to let them to see him and to speak with the chief clerk. And the others were being so instant, and he was curious to learn what they would say when they caught sight of him. If they were shocked that it would no longer be Gregor's responsibility, he could rest. And he could rest. If, however, they took everything calmly, he would have no reason to be upset. And if he hurried, be ready could be desertion for 8 o'clock. The first few times he tried to climb up the smooth chest of drawers, he just slid down again. But he finally gave himself one last shriek and stood there upright. The lower part of the body was a serious pain, but he no longer gave any attention to it. Now he let himself fall against the back of a nearby chair and held tightly to the edge of it with his little legs. By now he had also climbed down and kept quiet so that he could listen to what the chief clerk was saying. Did you understand a word of all that? The chief clerk asked his parents. Surely he's not trying to make a fool of us. Oh God. Call his mother, who's already in tears. He could be seriously ill, and we're going to make him suffer. Greety, greety. She then cried, Mother. His sister called from the other side. They communicated across Gregor's room. You have to go to the doctor straight away. Gregor is ill. Quick, get the doctor. Did you hear the way Gregor speak just now? That was the voice of an animal, said the chief clerk, with a calmness that was in contact with his mother's screams. Anna! Anna! His father called into the kitchen, though, the entrance hall, clapping his hands. Get the locksmith here now. And the two girls, their skirts swishing, immediately ran out through the hall. Richard opened the front door as flat as they went. How had his sister managed to get dressed so quickly? There was no sound of a door being shut again. They must have left it open. People often do in homes where something awful has happened. Gregor in contracts, he became much calmer, so they couldn't understand his words anymore. Although they seemed clear enough to him, clearer than before. Perhaps his ears had become used to the sound. They had realized, though, there was something wrong with him. They were ready to help. The first response to his situation had been comfort and wise, and made him feel better. He felt that he had been drawn back in among people. And from the doctor and the locksmith, he expected great and surprising achievements, although he did not really distinguish one from the other. Whatsoever was said next to be so cruel. So, in order to make his voice so clear as possible, he coughed a little, but taking care to do this not too loudly, as even this might sounded different from the way that human coughs. He was no longer sure he could judge for himself. Meanwhile, it had become very quiet in the next room. Perhaps his parents were sat at the table whispering with the chief clerk, or perhaps they were all pressed against the door and listening. Slowly, Gregor pushed his way over the door with a chair. Once there, he let go of it. He threw himself onto the door, holding himself upright against it, using it as a headset on the tips of his legs. He rested there a little while to recover from the effort involved, and then he set himself to the task of turning the key in the lock with his mouth. He seemed, unfortunately, to have no proper teeth. How was he, then, to grasp a key? But the lack of teeth was, of course, made up with the very strong jaws. Using the jaws, he was already able to start the key turning. Ignoring the fact that he must have been causing some kind of a damage as brown fluid came from his mouth, flowing over the key and dropped onto the floor. Listen, he's turned the key. Gregor was greatly encouraged by this, but they all should have been calling to him, his father and mother too. Well done, Gregor, they should have cried. Keep at it. Keep hold of the lock. With the idea that they were all excitedly following his efforts, he's bit on the key with all his strength, paying no attention to the pain he was causing himself. As the key turned around and he turned around the lock of it, by holding himself upright with his mouth and hung onto the key or push it down again with the whole weight of his body and needed. The clear sound of the lock was snapped back on Gregor's sign that he could break with his concentration. And as he regained his breath, he said to himself, so I didn't need the locksmith after all. Then he lay his head on the handle of the door and opened it completely. Because he had to open the door in this way, it was already wide open before he could be seen. He had to first slowly turn himself one of the double doors, and he had to do it very carefully. And if he did not want to fall flat on his back before entering the room, he was still occupied with this difficult movement, unable to pay attention to anyone else or anything else, when he heard the chief clerk exclaim aloud, "Oh," which sounded like a soughing on the wind. Now he also saw him. He was in the nearest to the door, his hand pressed against his mouth open, and slowly retreating as if driven by a steely and invisible force. Gregor's mother, her hair still disheveled from bed despite of chief clerk's being there, looked at his father. Then she unfolded her arms, took 2 steps forward towards Gregor, and sank down onto the floor into her skirts that spread themselves out around hostile, and clenched his fist as if wanting to knock Gregor back into his room. Then he looked uncertainly round in the living room, covered his eyes with his hand, and wept so that his powerful chest shook. So Gregor did not go to the room, but leaned against inside of the other door, which was still held bolted in place. In this way, only half of his body could be seen, along with his head above it, which he leant over to one side, then peered out at the other. Meanwhile, the day had become much lighter. Part of the endless gray-black building on the other side of a street, which was hospital, could be seen quite clearly with the austere and regular lines of window piercing its facade. The rain was still falling, now throwing down large individual droplets which would hit the ground one at a time. The washing up from breakfast lay on the table. There was so much of it because for Gregor's father, breakfast was the most important meal of the day. He would scratch it out for several hours as he sat reading a number of different newspapers. On a wall exactly opposite there was a photograph of Gregor when he was a lieutenant in the army, his sword in his hand, and a carefree smile on his face. He called forth respect for his uniform and bearings. The door to the entrance hall was open. As the front door of the flat was open, he could see into the landing of the stairs where they began their way down below. But now then, I'll get dressed straight away now, pack up my samples, and set off. Will you please just leave me? You can see, he said to the chief clerk, that I'm not stubborn and I like to do my jobs, being a commercial traveler and a tourist, but without traveling, I couldn't even earn my living. So where are you going? Into the office? Yes. Will you report everything accountably then? It's quite possible for someone to be temporarily unable to work. But that's just right time to remember what's been achieved in the past. Consider that later on. Once the difficulty has been removed, he will continually work with more of a diligence and concentrations. You're all aware that I'm seriously adept to our employers, as well as I'm having to look after my parents and my sister, so that I'm trapped with a difficult situation, but I will work in my way out of it again. Please don't make things any harder for me than they are now already, and don't take sides against me at the office. I know that nobody likes the travelers. They think we can enormous wage as well as having a soft time of it. That's just prejudice. But they have no particular reason to think better of it. But you, sir, you have a better overview than the rest of the staff. In fact, if can stay in a confidence, a better view than the boss himself. It's very easy for a businessman like him to make mistakes about his employees and judge them more harshly than he should. And you're also well aware that we travelers spent almost the whole year away from the office, so that we can very easily fall victim to grasp and chance regardless complaints. It is also impossible to defend yourself from that sort of a thing. We don't usually even hear about them, or if it's all when arrive back home exhausted from the trip, and that's when we feel the harmful effects that's what's been going on without even knowing what's caused them. Please don't go away. At least first say something to show you got grant that I'm a pretty good right. At least, I think. But the chief clerk has turned away as soon as Gregor had started to speak, and with a pouting lips, only started stared back at him over his trembling shoulders as he left. He did not keep still for the moment while Gregor was speaking, but moved steadily towards the door without taking his eyes off of him. He moved very gradually, as if there had been some secret prohibition on leaving the room. There was only when he had ran to the entrance hall, that he made a sudden movement, drew his front form from the living room, and rushed forward in a panic. In a hall, he screeched to the right hand far out towards the stairway, as if out there. There was some supernatural force waiting to save him. Gregor realized that it was out of the question to let the chief clerk go away in a mood. If he position in a firm was not to be put into extreme danger. That was something his parents did not understand very well. Over the years, they had become convinced that this job would provide for Gregor for his entire life. And besides, they had so much worry about an apparent that they had lost sight of any thought for the future. Gregor, though, did think about the future. Chief Clerk had to held back, calm down, convinced that it finally won over. The future of Gregor and his family depend on it. If only his sister were here. She was clever. She was already in tears while Gregor was still lying peacefully on his back. And the Chief Clerk was a lover of women. Surely he could persuade him. She could close and front the door in a entrance hall and talk him out of his shock state. But his sister was not there. Gregor would have to do the job himself, without considering that he's still not familiar how he could move about his parents' state, or that his speech might still not. Or probably would not be understand. He let go of the door, pushed himself through the opening, tried to reach the Chief Clerk onto the landing, who ridiculously was holding onto the banister with both hands. But Gregor fell immediately over, and with a little scream he saw something was held onto, landing on enormous little legs. Hardly had that happened then. It was for the first time in a day he began to feel all right with his body. The little legs had soil ground under them. To his pressure, they did not exactly help, as he told him. They were even making the effort to carry him where he wanted to go. And he was soon believing that all his sorrows would soon be finally at the end. He held back the urge to move but swayed from side to side, and he crouched out there on the floor. His mother was not far away in front of him, and seemed at first quite engrossed in herself, but then she suddenly jumped up with her arms outstretched and her fingers spread, shouting, "Help! For pity's sake, help!" The way she held her hand suggested that she wanted to see Gregor better. But the unthinking way she was horrifying backwards showed that she did not. She had forgotten that the table was behind her with all the breakfasting on it. But when she reached the table, she sat quietly down on it. When she reached for the table, she sat quietly down on it without knowing what she was doing. Without even seeming to notice that the coffee pot had been knocked over with a gush. Coffee was poured down onto the carpet. Mother, said Gregor, looking up at her. He had completely forgotten the Chief Clerk for the moment, but could not help himself snapping in the air with his jaws at the sight of a flow of coffee. That his mother screaming anew. She fled from the table and into the arms of the father as he rushed towards her. Gregor, though, had no time to spare for his parents now. The Chief Clerk had already reached the stairs, with his chains of a banister. He looked back for the last time. Gregor made a run for him. He wanted to be sure of reaching him. The Chief Clerk must have expected something, as he kept down several steps at once and disappeared. His shouts resounded all around the staircase.